His voice sliced through the hallway before I even had time to steady my breath. "You're a burden, Mother. If you can't understand that, then get out today." For a moment, the air stopped moving. The curtains hung still, the clock on the wall ticked louder, and the weight of his words settled inside my chest like cold stones. I stood there, fingers trembling slightly against the edge of my shawl, trying to understand how a child I carried in my body could speak to me with such sharp, practiced cruelty. But I didn't answer. I couldn't. If I opened my mouth, everything inside me would shatter. So instead, I quietly turned away. My slippers brushed softly against the floor as I walked into the small guest room, the one they called my space, though it held nothing of me except the silence I'd learned to live in. I reached for the old suitcase I'd kept under the bed. The zipper rasped open like a sigh, tired and familiar. I folded my clothes slowly, gently, as if packing away years of pain required delicate hands. A simple sweater. My husband's photograph. The rosary he gave me on our last anniversary. None of these things weighed much, but together they felt like my entire life. Behind me, his footsteps thudded through the house, sharp, irritated, restless. I could picture the crease between his brows, the one he inherited from his father. Funny how he inherited the expression, but not the heart. My hands paused mid-fold when I heard the front door slam. Then silence. Then a low, powerful engine hum outside the window. It didn't belong to any of the neighbors. Too smooth. Too expensive. Too deliberate. I moved slowly toward the curtain, lifting it with the tips of my fingers. A sleek, dark car rolled to a stop in front of the house. Not a taxi. Not a delivery. Something else, something almost out of place on this quiet street. The sun glinted sharply off the polished chrome, forcing me to blink. My heartbeat fluttered, not from fear, but from a strange, sudden awareness that this moment wasn't ordinary. Someone stepped out. Tall. Well-dressed. Moving with the kind of confidence only certain kinds of men carry, and for reasons I couldn't yet understand, he looked directly toward the house. Toward me. As if he already knew I'd be watching. Before I could process what I was seeing, a knock echoed through the walls, 3 slow, firm taps that made my son turn toward the door with confusion and irritation. I clutched the edge of my suitcase tighter. Because somehow, I knew. My life was about to change. And the person who came for me wasn't here by accident. The morning had started like every other morning in this house, quiet, heavy, and filled with chores that were never spoken of but always expected. I stood at the sink washing plates that weren't mine, scrubbing away bits of scrambled egg my son left crusted to the porcelain, wiping away lipstick stains from the edge of his wife's coffee mug. The water was warm, but my hands felt cold. Behind me, the sound of laughter drifted from the living room. Not the warm kind that fills a home, but the sharp, dismissive kind that makes your shoulders tighten even when you're not part of the conversation. "Did you iron my blouse yet?" Her voice, smooth, young, and always wrapped in that tone that sounded like disapproval dressed as politeness. "I placed it on your bed, dear," I answered softly. A beat of silence. The kind that tells you your answer wasn't the one they wanted. I dried my hands and walked into the hallway, pausing when I saw her, Emily. My daughter-in-law. Leaning on the doorframe, manicured nails tapping against her phone screen, hair perfectly curled as if it behaved out of fear rather than styling. She didn't look up. "Next time, try not to crease the sleeves. I'm presenting in front of senior staff today." I nodded. Of course. She still didn't look at me. I walked past her, the faint scent of her expensive perfume lingering like arrogance in the air. It reminded me how little space I truly took in this house, how invisible I'd become. On the coffee table, my son's work shirt lay balled up like trash. I picked it up, smoothed the wrinkles with my fingers, and carried it to the laundry room. My steps were slow, careful, familiar. This house wasn't my home. It was my assignment. And the only reason I stayed was him. My Daniel. My firstborn. The boy who once ran into my arms after school, who cried into my lap when he scraped his knees, who whispered secrets to me under blankets during thunderstorms. But that boy was long gone. In his place stood a man shaped by someone else's influence, someone who saw me not as family but as unnecessary weight to be shed the moment it became inconvenient. I still remember the first time she suggested the idea. "Your mom is getting older, Dan," she had said, voice sweet but eyes cold. "It's not safe for her to be here alone when we're working so much. Maybe a care home would be better." Better. A word she used often, but never kindly. It started small. Little things. Little cuts. The way she'd roll her eyes when I couldn't hear her the first time. The way she'd whisper to him in the kitchen, glancing at me as if I were a problem they needed to solve. The way my laundry basket always seemed heavier than it should, filled with their clothes, their towels, their messes, but never their gratitude. One afternoon, I overheard her say, "She's slowing us down. We can't start a family with her here. It's suffocating." I stood in the hallway, breath trapped in my chest, gripping the handrail because the floor felt suddenly uneven. She wasn't just talking to him. She was shaping him. And day by day, I watched pieces of him disappear. He spoke to me less. Asked me for nothing but chores. Stopped sitting beside me during dinner. Stopped listening when I spoke. Stopped looking at me with love. He became a shadow of the father who raised him, and a mirror of the woman who wanted me gone. That morning, while folding laundry, I heard her voice again from the living room. "Daniel, she's still here. We talked about this." His sigh cut through the house. "I know, I'll handle it. Handle it." I placed the last piece of clothing down and stood still for a moment, listening to the silence that followed. Then, his footsteps. Firm. Rushed. Agitated. He stopped in the doorway, jaw clenched. "Mother," he said, holding onto the doorframe as if steadying himself from guilt he refused to feel. "We've talked about this. You can't keep living here like this." I opened my mouth to speak, but his voice rose, frustration boiling over into something uglier. "You're too much. It's too much. You're a burden, Mother." There it was. The word he had never used before. The one she'd planted. The one he'd watered with silence until it grew strong enough to weaponize. The room felt smaller. The air thicker. My chest tighter. But I didn't cry. Even as he stood there, eyes hard and unfamiliar, even as she appeared behind him with crossed arms and a satisfied lift of her chin. I stayed still. Quiet. Dignified. "Pack your things," he said. "Today." My fingers curled into the fabric of my dress. I felt something shift inside me. A slow, painful cracking, like an old wooden door forced open after years of being shut. Not anger. Not shock. Not even heartbreak. Just truth. The truth that the boy I raised was gone. And the man standing in front of me was someone I no longer recognized. I nodded once, turning away. As I walked back to my room, each step felt heavier than the last, but something else stirred beneath the weight. A trembling. A whisper. A faint, fragile spark of something I hadn't felt in years. The beginning of an ending. and the beginning of something else. Little did I know, the moment I closed that bedroom door behind me, destiny had already parked itself outside. Waiting. Watching. About to knock. I closed the bedroom door gently, so gently that it barely made a sound. It felt symbolic, in a way. As if I were trying not to disturb the last fragile pieces of myself still holding on inside. The room was dim, lit only by the soft morning light sneaking through the curtains. My old suitcase waited in the corner where I had left it earlier, its faded edges worn from years of travel I never truly took. I knelt beside it, my knees protesting softly beneath me, and placed my palm on the lid for a moment, before I opened it. Inside, the fabric smelled faintly of cedar and thyme. I began folding my belongings with deliberate slowness. Not because I needed more time, but because I needed a moment to feel all the years I had lived for others instead of myself. A cardigan I'd knitted when Daniel was just a toddler, back when I had stayed up late to keep him warm during the cold nights he'd get sick. A scarf I crocheted for his first day at university. Even now, tiny threads of memory clung to each stitch. My hands trembled when I picked up the framed photograph on my nightstand. It was my wedding picture, me in a simple lace dress I had sewn myself, standing next to the man who taught me everything about patience, softness, and strength. My husband stood tall beside me, smiling with an ease that made every hardship feel small. His absence weighed on my shoulders every day, but never more than now. I ran my thumb over the glass, tracing his face. "You would have known what to say," I whispered into the stillness. "And he would have listened to you." The thought pushed a warm tear down my cheek, but I wiped it away quickly. There was no time for tears. Not today. I wrapped the photo in an old shawl before placing it carefully inside the suitcase, like I was tucking an old truth safely away. I had once been loved. Deeply. As I turned to gather the last few items, the floor creaked softly behind me. I didn't need to look to know who it was. Daniel leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed. His eyes scanned the room, not with sorrow or hesitation, but with impatience. It hurt more than the words he had thrown at me earlier. He wasn't conflicted. He wasn't struggling. He wasn't even thinking. He just wanted me gone. "You don't have much stuff," he said flatly. I swallowed. "I don't need much." He shrugged. Shifted his weight. Looked at his watch. As if time itself wanted me out faster than he did. I picked up the last item from my dresser. A small silver bracelet with a tiny engraved star. My husband gave it to me the night Daniel was born. "You're the light he'll follow," he had said. Now, I wasn't sure he was following anything anymore. I placed the bracelet on my wrist. The metal felt colder than usual. When I zipped the suitcase, the sound cut through the room like a final line drawn between what was mine and what had been taken from me. "Are you done?" Daniel asked. The words were harsh, but the tone was worse. It was empty. "Yes," I whispered. I stood up slowly, gripping the handle of the suitcase. The weight wasn't much, yet somehow it pulled at my arm like gravity had doubled since morning. We walked toward the living room, silence stretching between us. Not the comfortable silence of family, but the strained silence of strangers passing through the same space. Emily stood there waiting, arms folded, lips pressed into a thin line that almost resembled satisfaction. "Make sure she doesn't forget anything," she said to Daniel, as though I weren't inches from her. I said nothing. It was pointless to remind someone of the humanity they had already chosen to stop seeing. I was 2 steps from the door when it happened. Ding, dong. The doorbell rang. A crisp, sharp sound that sliced through the house with an energy none of us expected. Daniel frowned. "Who the hell?" Emily's expression tightened. I froze, fingers tightening around my suitcase handle. The bell rang again. Firm. Unhesitant. Almost purposeful. For a moment, no one moved. Then Daniel huffed in annoyance and walked to the door. He pulled it open. And his face shifted instantly, the irritation melting into something else entirely. Confusion. Surprise. Maybe even a touch of fear. From where I stood, I couldn't see the visitor just yet. But I could see the way my son's shoulders straightened. The way he swallowed hard. The way his eyes flicked briefly toward me. Whoever was standing outside wasn't ordinary. Emily stepped closer, her posture stiff. "What's going on?" she whispered, trying to peek over his shoulder. Daniel didn't answer. I took a step forward, the suitcase wheels rolling softly behind me. And then I saw him. A man, tall, composed, dressed in a dark coat that caught the light like polished obsidian. His car idled behind him, sleek as midnight, its engine humming with quiet authority. He wasn't smiling. He wasn't confused. He wasn't here by accident. His eyes found mine, calm, steady, almost familiar in a way that made every hair on my arms rise. "Mrs. Alvarez?" he asked gently. "May I come in?" My breath caught in my throat. Because somehow, in that moment, I knew my life was about to unravel and rebuild itself in ways none of us could have predicted. And the stranger at the door was the beginning of it. Daniel stood frozen in the doorway, blocking half the frame as if shielding the house from something too large to comprehend. Emily hovered behind him, gripping his arms so tightly her knuckles turned pale. The man on the doorstep waited patiently, hands clasped neatly in front of him. And though he didn't speak again, the silence he carried felt heavy, powerful. Like he had walked through storms far bigger than this house and didn't fear a single thing inside it. He stepped forward a little, not enough to invade, just enough to be undeniable. His suit was tailored, midnight blue. His shoes polished to a mirror shine. His silver hair neatly combed back, catching the sunlight like threads of glass. But it was his eyes that struck me most. Calm, clear, and filled with a kind of recognition that made my chest tighten. As he looked past Daniel, directly at me, his face softened. "Mrs. Alvarez," he repeated warmly, "I've been looking for you." The words hung in the air, electric. Emily blinked fast. "Looking for her?" Daniel straightened. "Sir, I think you're mistaken. My mother doesn't know anyone like." But the man raised one gloved hand. Not rudely. Not forcefully. Just with a quiet authority that stopped my son mid-sentence. "I assure you," he said, "I know exactly who she is." Then his gaze returned to me, gentler, kinder. "May I come in? Or, perhaps you would prefer to speak outside?" My throat tightened as every emotion I had been suppressing all morning began pressing upward. I nodded, stepping closer. Daniel moved aside reluctantly, though confusion flickered across his face. Emily's suspicion sharpened, like she was afraid this stranger might be someone who could actually see through her perfect facade. As I approached the door, the man inclined his head respectfully. He spoke softly, just to me. "You haven't changed," he said with a small smile. "Not where it matters." My brows furrowed. "I'm sorry, have we met?" For a moment, something tender flickered in his eyes. "You wouldn't remember me," he said. "But I remember you." He turned slightly, allowing me to see the long black limousine parked at the curb, sleek and impossibly elegant, the kind of vehicle that belonged in a different world entirely. Daniel stared at it, jaw tight. Emily grabbed his arm. Dan, who is he? But neither of them mattered, not to the stranger, not in this moment. He focused only on me. My name is Victor Hartwell, he said. Your husband, your late husband, saved my life once. My breath caught. He continued gently, years ago, before he passed, we worked together. I was a desperate man then, Mrs. Alvarez. Broken, struggling, making mistakes I didn't know how to undo. Your husband took me under his wing. He gave me work. He gave me dignity. And he never once asked for anything in return. The memory of my husband's warm smile flashed in my mind, and I swallowed hard. During those years, Victor went on, there was one afternoon I arrived at your house unexpectedly, and you gave me tea. You listened to me talk about my son, my failings, my fears. You probably thought it was nothing. I remembered offering tea to many men over the years. My husband often brought home colleagues when they needed support or advice. I never imagined one would return. For you, he said softly, it was kindness. For me, it was the first time anyone had treated me like a human being in a long time. He breathed in deeply, as if steadying himself. When I heard what happened to your husband, I tried to find you. But life, work, everything got complicated. I lost your trail. Until recently. Daniel shifted uncomfortably. Sir, this is really unexpected. We don't usually. The stranger didn't even look at him. Mrs. Alvarez, he said, your husband once asked me for only one thing. If anything ever happens to me, look after my wife. My knees nearly buckled. He stepped forward, offering his arm. I'm here, he said with gentle firmness, to honor that promise. Emily's lips parted in disbelief. Daniel's face drained of color. Where are you taking her? He demanded, suddenly uneasy. Victor finally turned his eyes to my son, calm but unyielding. To a place, he said, where she will be valued. Respected. Cared for. Not tolerated. Daniel stiffened, as if struck. And if she wishes, Victor added, looking back at me, she may never have to lift another finger again. My suitcase suddenly felt lighter. All morning, I'd expected my exit to be one of humiliation, walking away alone, unwanted. But now, someone had arrived not to rescue me, but to restore me. I placed my hand on Victor's arm. His expression softened into something I hadn't seen directed at me in a long time. Sincere respect. He nodded once, as though confirming a silent decision between us both. Shall we go? He asked. I took a breath. Then another. And with a calm dignity I forgot I possessed. I stepped forward. Behind me, Emily's voice cracked. Wait, what does this mean? Daniel reached out as if to stop me, regret flickering too late across his face. But I didn't look back. As Victor guided me toward the waiting limousine, I realized something profound. The stranger hadn't just arrived for me. He had arrived to show them, my son, his wife, that the world had not forgotten who I was. And as the door opened to the luxurious car, I stepped inside. Not as a burden. Not as a guest. But as someone finally being reclaimed. Someone finally being seen. The drive felt unreal, like time itself had loosened its grip on me. The limousine moved silently through the city, gliding past streets I once knew, past neighborhoods where memories still lingered like old shadows. But we didn't stop anywhere familiar. Instead, the buildings grew taller. The houses grander. The air somehow lighter, as though the world here lived at a slower, gentler rhythm. Victor watched me quietly from across the plush leather interior. Not staring, not judging, just present. As if he understood that silence, sometimes, is the only kindness a person needs. When the car finally stopped, I realized we were at the base of a towering modern building, glass shimmering like water, balconies framed with elegant greenery. It looked like a place where important people lived, people with futures, not leftovers of their pasts. "This way," Victor said softly. He offered his arm again. I hesitated, still unsure if all this was meant for me, but he waited patiently, not rushing, not assuming. We entered through tall doors into a lobby that felt more like a quiet sanctuary than a residential building. Polished stone floors, soft golden lighting, the faint scent of jasmine drifting through the air. A doorman bowed slightly. "Mr. Hartwell. Everything is prepared." Prepared. For me? The elevator ride was silent except for the soft hum of ascent. My breath caught as the numbers climbed higher. And higher. And higher. Penthouse level. When the doors slid open, the space before me took my breath away. A wide, open living area bathed in warm sunlight pouring through floor-to-ceiling windows. Beyond the glass, the city stretched endlessly, its lights twinkling in daylight like distant stars. The air felt fresh, clean, almost forgiving. "This is..." My voice broke. "I don't understand." "It's yours," Victor said gently. "For as long as you want it." I took one step inside, and my legs gave out. Not from weakness, but from release. All the years of quiet suffering. All the swallowed words. The humiliation. The loneliness. The aching disappointment. The truth of it all surged through me at once. I covered my mouth with both hands as sobs tore through my chest, messy, uncontrollable, the kind that don't ask for permission. I wept for my husband. For my son. For the woman I became. For the woman I used to be. Victor didn't interrupt. He didn't awkwardly hover. He simply stepped beside me, placed a steady hand on my shoulder, and let me cry. "You're safe here," he murmured. "Let it out. You've held too much for too long." His voice was steady, grounding, like someone speaking from the other side of their own storms. When my breathing finally slowed, he handed me a soft handkerchief. Embroidered initials, VH. "I didn't do anything to deserve this," I whispered, wiping my eyes. He paused, looking at me with a mix of sorrow and admiration that felt disarming. "You did more than you know." I shook my head. "I don't even remember helping you." "I know," he said. "But I remember. Every moment." He walked toward the window, hands clasped behind his back. "I spent years searching for you, Mrs. Alvarez. Not just because I owed your husband, but because I owed you." My heart thudded painfully. He continued, voice low. "You were kind to me at a time when I had lost my family's trust. You didn't know who I was, you didn't know what I had done, you just saw a man in pain and offered compassion." He turned, meeting my gaze fully. "That kind of goodness stays with a person. It changes them." I swallowed hard, overwhelmed. Victor breathed in slowly. "But there's another reason I came." I waited. He stepped closer, expression more serious now, almost troubled. "Your husband left something unfinished," he said. "A matter he trusted only me to handle. Something connected to you." My pulse quickened. What do you mean?" He hesitated, not because he didn't know what to say, but because the weight of his next words carried years of secrecy. "There's something he wanted you to have," he said softly. Something important. Something he never told anyone else about. My breath stopped. He asked me to protect it until the day you needed it most. I stared at him. And today, he said with certainty, is that day. A chill swept through me, fear, curiosity, hope, and disbelief all tangled together. Before I could ask another question, Victor motioned toward a closed door down the hallway. Come, he whispered. It's time you know the truth. The hallway felt almost sacred as I followed Victor toward the closed door he'd pointed to. Every step felt like it carried the weight of years I'd swallowed, endured, survived. But just as he reached for the doorknob, my handbag vibrated sharply against my side. I froze. Another vibration. Then another. I pulled out my phone. 7 missed calls, Daniel. 2 more, Emily. And they were still coming. The screen lit up again with his name flashing desperately. Daniel, calling. I stared at it, not with panic, not with guilt, but with a strange, quiet clarity I had never known before. Victor watched me gently. You don't have to answer. The phone continued buzzing in my hand, vibrating like some frightened creature begging for attention. For years, decades even, I had responded to every call, every need, every sigh of disappointment. I had lived in readiness, apologizing even when I wasn't sure what I was apologizing for. But now, in this calm, beautiful place where I was finally treated as a human being, their urgency felt strangely small. Weak. Too late. I swiped the call away. Declined. Almost instantly. Another call. His voice message notifications flooded in one after another. Mom, where did you go? Why did you leave like that? Can you please call me back? Emily says we should talk, just call me. Mom? Hello? Why aren't you answering? The tone grew anxious with each one. The confidence he had earlier, that cold, sharp certainty, was gone. Now there was fear, confusion, regret nipping at the edges. I took a breath and pressed the side button. The screen finally went dark. Victor nodded approvingly, not with triumph, but with understanding. You don't owe anyone your pain, he said quietly. Not anymore. I closed my eyes, letting his words settle deep, deeper than anything had in years. Because for the first time in my life, I chose myself. The buzzing stopped. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was liberating. A soft smile tugged at the corner of my mouth. A small, fragile victory. But a victory all the same. And somewhere across the city, in a house where I had once stayed invisible, my son was finally feeling something I had carried alone for far too long. Regret. Loss. Consequences. Victor placed a reassuring hand on the door beside us, his eyes warm with respect. Are you ready? He asked. I nodded. More certain than I had ever been. Then, he said, pushing the door open slowly, let's finish what your husband started. And with that, the past, my past, began to shift. For the first time, I wasn't answering anyone else's call. I was answering my own. The door closed behind us with a soft click, sealing the world outside. Inside the room, the lighting was warm, almost gentle, like a place meant for truth rather than comfort. But as Victor walked toward an elegant wooden cabinet at the center, something inside me began to stir. Something old. Something painful. Something I had pushed so deep down, it now rose like a tide with no shore to hold it back. He opened the cabinet slowly. Before you see what your husband left for you, you need to remember what brought you here. And just like that, the memories hit. Not all at once, but in layers. Like peeling old wallpaper, revealing the wounds beneath. It started small, as most betrayals do. Daniel stopped asking how I was feeling. Stopped eating the meals I cooked. Stopped sitting with me on the couch. Instead, he'd say, "Mom, Emily prefers things her way. Try not to interfere too much." Interfere. As though caring were a disruption. I'd hear them whispering in the kitchen, her voice soft but sharp. "She's too sensitive. Don't let her guilt trip you, Dan. She's doing it on purpose." Doing what on purpose? Existing? Then came the money. "Mom," Daniel said one afternoon, "we're short on the house payment." "Just a little. You know we're trying." I didn't ask questions. I offered my savings. The savings I had built from years of sewing, small jobs, and leftover grocery money. A month later, they asked again. And again. And again. Eventually, my savings were gone. Then came the day he asked for something bigger. "Mom, could you sell Papa's old land? My business idea is taking off." This is the moment. My heart tightened. The land my husband had treasured. But Daniel's voice trembled with hope, and I couldn't resist that sound. So I signed the papers. 2 months later, I overheard Emily laughing on the phone. No, it wasn't his land. It was his mother's. Yes. She sold it just because he asked. Honestly, it's pathetic how easy she is to control. Control. A word that sliced like a blade. There were nights I'd hear them through thin walls. "Why is she still here?" Emily hissed. "She cooks like it's 1995. She doesn't know boundaries. She's suffocating us, Daniel. We can't have a baby with her under the same roof." A baby. A grandchild I had prayed for. Daniel murmured something I couldn't hear. Emily snapped back, voice dripping venom. "Then make her leave. Make me. The child I raised. The boy I carried. The man I loved. Being coached to discard me like old furniture." The chores increased gradually. Then became my entire identity in that house. Laundry. Cooking. Cleaning. Errands. But the moment I slowed down, the moment my back hurt too much, or my knees ached, or a dish slipped from my hands, Emily would sigh heavily. "With age comes inconvenience," she'd say. Sometimes right in front of me. Sometimes whispering behind my son's shoulder. Once, she placed her hand on his chest and said, "You deserve better than this, Dan. Better than her." Her. As though I were a burden tied to his ankles. But there was one moment I will never forget. The moment that truly broke something inside me. It was the night they hosted a dinner party with friends. I had spent the entire day preparing, cooking dishes from recipes passed down through my family. At the table, someone complimented the food. Emily laughed lightly and said, "Oh, thank you." I made everything. I blinked. Surely I misheard. But then Daniel added, "Yeah, she's amazing in the kitchen. She's been trying new recipes." And then they both looked at me, as if daring me to protest, as if telling me to stay in my place, invisible. I swallowed every truth that rose in my throat. And I smiled weakly, like a ghost at their table. Later that night, as I washed what felt like a mountain of dishes, I heard Emily whisper, "She's good for one thing, free labor. She should be grateful we let her stay." Grateful. I had given them money, time, love. I had sold memories. I had sacrificed my pride. And they expected gratitude for it. The lies grew bolder. They told friends I was financially dependent on them. They told neighbors I insisted on living with them. They told relatives I refused to move to a home out of stubbornness. All while they used me, drained me, dismissed me. I stood in Victor's quiet, elegant room, the flashbacks fading like smoke. But something felt different now. This time, when the memories surfaced, they didn't crush me. They clarified me. For the first time, I saw everything without excuses. They didn't love me. They used me. They diminished me. They betrayed me. My chest tightened, not with sadness, but with awakening. Victor watched my expression shift, as if he saw the exact moment the light finally broke through the dark. "You see it now," he said softly. I nodded slowly, exhaling years of denial in one trembling breath. "Yes," I whispered. And when I spoke again, my voice was stronger. "I finally see them as they truly are." Victor gestured toward a polished wooden desk in the center of the room. "There's something you need to see," he said, voice calm but deliberate. I approached, heart tight, sensing the weight of what was coming. He opened a drawer and pulled out a stack of papers, bound together with a faded ribbon. The top sheet caught my eye immediately, a will. "This," he said, "is just the beginning." One by one, he revealed ownership shares in businesses I never knew existed. Bank statements showing accounts I thought were empty, or belonged to them, full of my own money. Forged signatures on legal documents, making it look like I consented to things I had never signed. I stared, my hands trembling. Each paper was a punch I had been missing for years. He handed me an envelope sealed in red wax. Inside were photographs, receipts, and notes. Stolen heirlooms, some from my late husband, sold without my knowledge. Funds meant for me from inheritance, siphoned into accounts under Daniel's name. Letters proving that my sacrifices, the land, the savings, even my personal belongings, had been systematically exploited. My stomach dropped. Each line, each signature, each transaction screamed betrayal. Victor's expression softened. "I've been waiting for the right moment to show you this. The law can be messy, but the truth is always clear." The documents revealed contracts signed without my consent, money transferred from my accounts by false authorization, my identity misrepresented to manipulate financial systems. Everything I had built, every sacrifice I had made, had been twisted into something unrecognizable by the people I loved most. I sank into the chair, papers trembling in my hands. Slowly, the truth crystallized. I was never a burden. I was their financial backbone. They had lied to me my entire life. Every favor they claimed to do for me was a sham. Every smile, every thank you, every small acknowledgement, all false. The anger rose, sharp and cold. Not tears this time, but clarity. For decades, I had blamed myself for the tension, the arguments, the loneliness. Now I saw it clearly. It was them, not me. I looked at Victor. All these years, all my sacrifices, and I stayed silent. I whispered, voice breaking. "No more," I said, firmer this time. He nodded. You have every right to speak, to claim what's yours, to stand tall. For the first time, I felt power instead of fear, agency instead of guilt. I knew what I had to do. I would not stay silent anymore. I would not let lies and betrayal define my life. Not now. Not ever. The night was crisp, the city lights glittering like a stage set. I looked at my reflection one last time before stepping out. Sleek hair, a dress that spoke of elegance, not apology, and a confidence I hadn't felt in decades. With each step toward the restaurant, I felt the weight of years lift. This wasn't the timid woman they had dismissed, it was someone reborn. The door swung open, and I entered deliberately, heels clicking on the marble floor. Heads turned, but my gaze was fixed ahead. Daniel and Marissa were already seated, faces pale, the first flickers of panic crossing their expressions. I let the silence stretch. One glance, one slow breath, and they knew something had changed. Something dangerous. I placed a thick folder on the table. The paper slid open with a satisfying thud, bank statements, wills, photos, and letters, all laid bare. Their hands trembled as they reached for the documents. I think you'll want to read these carefully, I said calmly, letting each word land like a hammer. Daniel stuttered, Mom, this isn't. I cut him off, voice steady and commanding. For years, I was ignored, belittled, treated like a maid in my own home. I was manipulated, lied to, and robbed of my dignity, and yet I stayed silent. Not anymore. Marissa opened her mouth to interrupt. I shook my head. No. You will not gaslight me, manipulate me, or rewrite history. I know exactly what you've done. I leaned forward, eyes piercing, voice clear. I raised you, fed you, sacrificed for you, and you repay me with betrayal. You thought I wouldn't notice the lies, the stolen money, the deceit, but I see everything now. And I am not afraid. I will not be silenced. I will not be humiliated. Not by you. Not ever again. The restaurant seemed to hold its breath. Every patron, every clink of cutlery faded. It was just us, and the truth laid bare. They sat frozen, panic and shame etched across their faces. I felt a wave of satisfaction, not cruel, but just, like justice realized. I stood, gathering my folder. I came here as the woman you dismissed. I leave as the woman you'll never underestimate again. With that, I walked out, heels clicking with purpose, every step a declaration of control, strength, and independence. Outside, the cool night air wrapped around me. I had taken back my life. I was free. The door closed behind me, leaving them with nothing but their guilt and the truth they had tried to bury. Just when I thought the storm had passed, my phone buzzed insistently. It was a lawyer's number. Before I could even answer, another wave of chaos hit. Messages from Daniel and Marissa flooded my inbox. Daniel, Mom, please don't do this. I'll change, I swear. Marissa, you're ruining everything. You have no proof, and everyone will believe me. I scrolled, eyes narrowing. False accusations. Manipulation. A desperate attempt to regain control. Then the lawyer's voice came through, calm but urgent. Ma'am, there's a legal complication. They've filed claims against you, claims you need to respond to immediately. But don't worry, we can protect your interests. My heart raced. This wasn't over. The battle had shifted, and now the stakes were higher than ever. I sat back, clutching the folder of truth in one hand, phone in the other, a steely resolve forming. They may try to strike back, but I was ready. The story wasn't over. It was evolving, and this time, I would write the ending. The day of reckoning had arrived. I walked into the small office where the lawyer and the stranger awaited. The folder of evidence felt heavy, but in my hands, it was power. One by one, I laid out the truth. Hidden bank accounts, forged signatures, financial exploitation. The lies Daniel and Marissa had spun for years. Witnesses who had seen every betrayal, ready to testify. The stranger, calm and confident, stood by me, a silent pillar of support. As I spoke, their attempts at intimidation crumbled. Their fear was palpable, their excuses hollow. The room was mine. Finally, I paused, letting the weight of the moment sink in. I wasn't angry anymore. I was free. I was respected. I had my dignity back. Walking out, I felt the sunlight on my face. The city stretched before me, vast and welcoming. I found a quiet balcony, cupped a warm mug of tea in my hands, and breathed deeply. For the first time in years, I could simply be. Peace. Self-respect. Strength. The sun rose slowly over the horizon, golden and unwavering, just like me. And in that quiet, radiant moment, I knew one thing. I had survived. I had grown. And I would never let anyone make me feel small again. The story ends here, but the lesson lives on. Empowerment isn't about revenge, it's about reclaiming yourself. Thank you for watching this story all the way through. Stories like these remind us of the strength and resilience we can find even in the toughest situations. I'd love to hear from you. If you were in her shoes, what would you have done? Leave your thoughts in the comments. I read every single one. And don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss a story that inspires, empowers, and keeps you on the edge of your seat. Remember, your voice matters, your choices matter, and your strength matters.